Welcome, this is my guide to locating poetic techniques in a piece of poetry. Note, it's about explaining the meta-language of poetry to you. The difficult part is actually your job, which is to explain why a poet has used a certain strategy or technique and why and how they are trying to communicate something with this. So this is very basic. There will be about 19 different poetic techniques. They'll be explained and then I'll provide an example. So the learning intention is for you to be able to annotate a poem thoroughly and find all these techniques if they are present, and if they're not, explain why not. The success criteria will simply be for you to have an annotated poem that has a number of different techniques written on it, and as I said, the harder task is to explain why these were used. Alright, so the first and the simplest thing is you're looking for rhyme. So if there doesn't rhyme at all anywhere in the poem, then it's referred to as a free verse poem, which essentially means it doesn't follow any rhyming scheme and it's free to basically break the rules. If there are rhymes located inside the middle of a sentence or anywhere except the beginning and the end, then that's called a middle rhyme. So if there are rhyming words at the end of a sentence, then it's called end rhyme. As far as I know, there's no such thing as a start rhyme, though it could theoretically be possible, but it probably wouldn't make a lot of sense. So now that you've ascertained that it does rhyme, the second question is what rhymes with what? And the most easy and clearest example would be rhyming couplets, which is where the final word of two lines above and below one another rhyme. We call this rhyming couplets because they're in groups of two, and it's an example of end rhyme. If the rhyming words aren't directly below one another, they're more than likely on the first and the third, or the second and the fourth line respectively. We call this alternate rhyme because every second line or sentence rhymes with one another. The third technique and the easiest to find is alliteration, which is simply the same sound repeated. This could be a consonant sound such as S, 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 or it could be a vowel sound such as E, 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 E. The vowel sound is referred to as assonance, and the consonant sound being repeated is called consonance. The fourth technique is a bit fringe, but it's questions or rhetorical questions. So if there's a question asked that doesn't require an answer, then it's a rhetorical question. And if it's possible to be answered by some strange feat, then it's simply a question. The fifth technique you're looking for are sound effects, which is collectively known typically as onomatopoeia, which is when a sound is written as a sound. So wolf, zip, any sound. Imagine basically a cartoon and the explosion or the cutout image, and what is inside is onomatopoeia. So biff, bash, boom, explosion, crash, tumble. These sort of words are called onomatopoeia. The sixth is personification, and personification is just giving thoughts, feelings, or any sort of human emotion or characteristic to something that typically doesn't have it. So an example would be the clouds were angry at the man as they drenched him in rain. Number 7 is simile. So there's two types of symbolic language, metaphors and similes. Similes is the most simplistic of it. To find one, you're just looking for the word like. So you might say, Mr. Colbert is like a giraffe, both have a long neck. So as I said, metaphors is the other type of symbolic language you could look for here. And for here, you're looking at the word is or as. So Mr. Colbert is a giraffe because he has a long neck. Or Mr. Colbert is as tall as a giraffe. Number 9 is enjambment, and this is very easy to spot. The expectation is that a line of poetry has a full stop or a comma at the end. If it doesn't and it runs on, then we call that enjambment. And the verb of enjambment is enjammed. So you might say lines 1 through 5 are all enjammed with one another to give a sense of pace and frequency occurring within the poem. 10 is stanzas. In an essay, you call a group of text paragraphs. In a poem, they're called stanzas. Alright, this is where it gets a bit tricky. You can refer to your stanzas based on how many lines are in each. And to do this, I'll need to look down. 2 lines is a couplet, 3 lines is a tercet or a triplet, 4 lines is a quatrain, 5 lines is a quatrain or a quintet, 6 lines is a sixain or a sextet, 7 lines is a septet, 8 lines is a huaitain, 9 lines is a hexameter, and so on. There's also other ones, but the likelihood of a stanza that goes over 9 lines is so low that if your poem features a stanza that's over that number of lines. Number 12 is really easy as well, repetition. What's repeated, where, and how. 13 is imagery, and it's the easiest of all. You'll need to put a descriptive word in front of imagery, or a number of descriptive words, but basically imagery is displaying any image at all through descriptive or symbolic language. So you might say sun imagery, war imagery, blood imagery, dirt imagery. Basically any word in front of imagery makes a cogent sentence. Alright, so 14 contains two techniques. If you've done any annotating of a text with me, you'll know what these mean. A motif is a symbolic image that runs throughout an entire text, so for a poem that doesn't have to be particularly long, but as long as it's maintained throughout the entire poem, then it's a motif. Whereas a symbol is the same thing, symbolic language, but only localized to one stanza usually, or multiple stanzas of the poem, but not throughout the entirety of the poem. 15 is about language. So is the language euphemistic or dysphemistic? Euphemistic means you're beating around the bush, to use an expression, or you're avoiding the true reality of something, whereas dysphemistic means you're being perhaps overly forceful or overly clear about something. So for example, if I use the phrase euphemistically, I'm going to the bathroom, I'm probably not going to the bathroom, I'm probably going to the toilet. Dysphemistically, I might say I'm going to go do a dump. So obviously that is not quite polite, and dysphemism basically means being forceful in your language, whereas euphemistic means being polite and avoiding the true reality of the situation. 16 is connotations, and for this you're going to want to go through and circle any words you think are particularly powerful, meaningful, or make you think of other things. So connotations are the associated thoughts or images that come with a word that you have found in your poem. You might also want to consider whether these are positive or negative as well. So a word with positive connotations would be peace, love, happiness. A word with negative connotations would be war, death, terrorism, exile. 17 is juxtaposition, which is a very impressive sounding word, but it basically just means placing two things that are dissimilar side by side to show a clear contrast between them. So if you pose your young baby with a shotgun, then what you're doing is juxtaposing something adult with something very childish and innocent, and that's what we call juxtaposition.